Hello, everybody. This is Catholic Dad, episode number 403, Catholic Civics. It's not just Catholic civics, it's actually civics in itself. And I think probably the world in general, particularly the United States of America, but I think a lot of the rest of the world has a problem with it as well. People don't understand what civics are. And civics comes from the word civilization. Civilization means civil. And we are in the midst of a Marxist cultural revolution in the world that I don't think anybody of this generation or anybody alive today probably has ever seen, with the exception insofar of Eastern Europe. Some of the older people in Eastern Europe probably have seen such similar consequences to what's about to happen because the world has lost civics and civility. So what is civics? Civics is the capacity to have charitable conversation with one another, with public discourse, and not do violence to one another, and not break down, and not scream, not yell, not use emotion or emotional reasoning, but instead use charity and logical reasoning and logic and reason. To actually have a public discourse. You know, I am Catholic Dad. I stand up for my faith. I try to live my faith. And there are some things that I believe to be true based upon the teachings of my church, based upon natural law and Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine and so on and so forth, that when I say them, people become apoplectic. They lose their brains. Their whole head blows off and they start screaming and yelling. And this has led to the capacity for people not being able to be civil or practice civics, because diplomacy is this, by the way. Diplomacy is, I have an opinion, you hear my opinion, and then if you agree with my opinion, you say, you agree with my opinion. If you disagree with my opinion, you say, I disagree with your opinion, here's why, and here's my response. That's civics. And then I hear your opinion, and I either agree with your opinion, or I disagree with your opinion, and here's my response. And then if this goes back and forth, then we say, well, we have to agree to disagree. Good. Well, and then you can end the conversation with, perhaps you should read this book or this saint, or you can read this book or this, nihilist or whatever else, whoever wants to convince you of their position. And the great part is if we are convinced of our position, that we can actually try to convince the other people of our position and the other way around. And those who have a more reasonable argument would hopefully win out in the end. And I would probably guess the faith would rise to the top if we all practice logic and reason and civics instead of emotional reasoning. Emotional reason, Thomas Aquinas once said, by the way, that pure virtue is the absence of emotion. That literally all decisions, moral decisions, need to be made with logic and reason. Like you can't use your lower appetites or your emotions or your anger or your lust or whatever else to actually make logical decisions for your family or your society and so on and so forth. And I think what you're seeing, again, this COVID thing and this whole pandemic thing and the breakdown of society that's happening in 2020, which everybody says it's this year, but it's not. This is the culmination of many generations of breakdown of culture and civilization and civics. What you're seeing is everybody's resorting to emotional reasoning. And so I could walk down the street with a MAGA or even a red baseball cap on, no MAGA hat, and people will come up to me and physically assault me and be violent to me and be angry with me. And that's not civics at all. In fact, what that becomes is intellectual bullying or intellectual domination. And this goes back to the Garden of Eden. This is a little bit complex thought right now, but follow me on this one. Serpent comes to Eve because she's emotional, right? And he manipulates her into thinking that she doesn't have to be obedient to the Lord, the laws of God. And what she does is she turns to Adam after she eats the apple and says, here, you eat from the tree of knowledge too. And he does. From that point in time, Eve was inclined to dominate her husband. And from that point in time, Adam was inclined to submit to his wife. And that's why Everybody Loves Raymond, such a funny sitcom, because the fallen nature of man is just so ubiquitous. 99.9% of women have the spirit of Eve, where they want to dominate their husbands. 99.9% of men have the spirit of Adam, where they don't want to be true leaders of the family and the sheriffs of their family. And so, where was I going with this? So the spirit of Eve and civics, when you scream and yell and use your emotional reasoning to try to dominate the other side of the equation, that's the spirit of Eve. That you're going to do as I say, or I'm going to cry and weep and wail and fight you, versus using a logical argument to try to get your way. And the spirit of Adam is, caving to the spirit of Eve. And we're seeing this clash of civilizations, a clash of the titans right now. The hard left is the spirit of Eve, and those who are unwilling to stand up to it are the spirit of Adam. And all these things can be solved, and I've had some prior videos about this, with the replacement. The new Eve is the Blessed Virgin Mary, submitting to the will of God, and the new Adam is Christ, going into the desert in search of those who want to dominate his heart and combating him and doing battle with the devil. That's the spirit, that's Christ, and Christ replaces Adam. The Blessed Mother replaces Eve, and this is how we solve our problems as being Catholics, and that's what we need to work our way up to, depending on what our fallen nature is, and that's what a thick prayer life is supposed to be. And so I guess that's all I wanted to say. Civics is very important. Iron sharpens iron, so having public, thick, hard discourse is necessary to living in a civilized society, but when it breaks down into emotional reasoning and violence and anger, that's a problem. And in fact, I would like to say this. Those of you with the spirit of Eve, in terms of societal spirit of Eve, not family life, if you don't allow public discourse, the only thing you're left with is anger. And so what happens? Well, they're not listening, and they're only being violent. And then the hard left says, but you offend us so much and we're going to attack you. Well, that's when the hard right rises. So when you have the hard right rising and the hard left rising, now you have war. And that's what's going to happen. People, we need to get back to diplomacy. We need to get back to civics. We need to get back to prayer for life. And we need to get our emotions out of our conversations with other people. It needs to be pure logic and reason. And if you are the person that's inclined to being offended, don't have conversations with people about anything other than butterflies, flowers, and trees. That's it. Because if you go into theology, religion, you start breaking down and crying, you're a problem. That's intellectual domination. Don't do that. And if what I say, by the way, offends anybody listening to this, you suffer from the spirit of Eve. You're bothered by somebody having just an opinion. Like if you said, oh, you scream and yell at me, I'd be like, yeah, well, you're being a little irrational right now. You got to stop it. Let's be more reasonable and have a conversation. And then you start crying, wailing, screaming. And oh, by the way, I'd like to say this. The nasty comments that I get on my YouTube channel from people, you want to intellectually dominate me and you can't do it. Like you could try to do it, and maybe you would if you physically assaulted me and dominated me that way. But you really suffer from a problem. And so start meditating upon civics. The world needs more of it. It needs more diplomacy. It needs more give and take. And me as a Catholic man, I can state things like sodomy's wrong, contraception's wrong, gay marriage is wrong. You know, I can do the litany of what's wrong with society today. And you should be able to listen to that and not scream and yell and throw a fit and say I'm hateful and racist and horrible. Because I'm not. I'm literally trying to follow God's word. That's it. Well, anyway, this is Catholic Dad making you think about it. Please like or subscribe, get the Mass, and pray the Daily Rosary. God bless you all. Take care.